Commander Kira Salvith stood on the bridge of the Velthri warship Dominant Will and watched the blue-green planet grow larger in the viewing screen. It was a beautiful world. Gentle clouds drifted across vast oceans. Green continents stretched beneath a warm yellow sun. It looked peaceful. It looked weak. "Commander," her tactical officer said, "we are detecting minimal orbital defenses. One station. No warships. No military satellites." Kira allowed herself a small smile. The intelligence reports had been correct. The humans truly had become what the younger races whispered about in mocking tones. Farmers. Traders. A species that had simply given up on power and retreated to their quiet worlds at the edge of the galaxy. 300 years ago, the stories said, humanity had been something else, something terrible. But 300 years was a long time, and the Velthri Dominion had risen to fill the void that humanity left behind. Now the Dominion controlled 40 star systems, commanded the largest fleet in the sector, and answered to no one. "Send the surrender demand," Kira ordered. "Standard terms. They will hand over this colony, accept Velthri governance, and provide tribute in food and resources." The communications officer transmitted the message. They waited. The planet turned slowly below them. The single orbital station hung in space like a forgotten toy. The response came 3 minutes later. "Commander," the communications officer said, her voice uncertain, "they are refusing." Kira turned sharply. "Refusing? A single station against 50 warships? They say," the officer paused, reading the message again. "They say we should leave. They say this is not a threat. They say this is mercy." Laughter rippled across the bridge. Even Kira smiled at the absurdity. One station, no weapons visible, and they spoke of mercy as if they were the ones with power here. "Humans," her second officer muttered. "They have forgotten what strength looks like." Kira nodded. Perhaps this was why humanity had faded from galactic importance. They had lost their ability to recognize when they were beaten. It was almost sad. "Destroy the station," Kira commanded. "Show them what happens to those who refuse the Dominion." The Dominant Will fired. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, bright and deadly. They struck the station directly. Fire bloomed against its hull. Metal twisted and tore. And then something strange happened. The station did not explode. The fire faded. The damage remained, but beneath the broken outer hull, something else was visible. Something that gleamed with a dark metallic shine that Kira did not recognize. "What is that?" she demanded. Before anyone could answer, the station changed. Panels slid open along its surface. Structures unfolded like metal flowers blooming in fast motion. What had appeared to be a simple civilian station transformed before their eyes into something else entirely. Gun batteries emerged. Shield generators hummed to life. Sensor rays extended in all directions. The station had been wearing a mask, and the Velthri had just torn it off. "Commander," the tactical officer shouted, "the station is charging weapons. Power readings are..." "Commander, these readings cannot be correct." The view screen flickered. A human face appeared. It was a woman, middle-aged, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired eyes that held no fear. She wore a simple uniform with no visible rank or decoration. "Velthri vessels," she said, and her voice was calm in a way that made Kira's scales prickle with sudden unease. "You have fired upon protected territory. You have 30 seconds to withdraw. This is not a threat. This is mercy." The same words. The exact same words as before. But now, looking at that tired face and those ancient eyes, Kira heard them differently. "They are bluffing," her second officer insisted. "One station cannot." The station fired. A single beam of white light lanced out and struck the nearest Velthri cruiser. The cruiser did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, 10,000 tons of metal and weapons and crew. The next moment there was nothing but a fading glow where it had been. Silence fell across the bridge of the Dominant Will. 18 seconds, the human woman said. "All ships, return fire." Kira screamed. 50 warships opened up on the station with everything they had. Plasma bolts, missiles, kinetic rounds, energy beams. The space around the station filled with fire and fury, and the combined rage of the Velthri Dominion. The station's shields held. They did not flicker. They did not strain. They simply held, as if 50 warships were nothing more than insects throwing themselves against a window. 10 seconds, how is this possible? Kira whispered. On the planet below, something was happening. Lights were appearing across the dark side of the world. Not city lights, not natural phenomena. These lights pulsed in patterns, spreading outward from certain points in perfect geometric formations. The planet itself seemed to be waking up. 5 seconds, the human woman said. I am sorry for what comes next. Truly, I am. Kira opened her mouth to order a retreat. She was too late. The ground on the planet split open. Not in one place, but in dozens of places across every continent. Vast doors that had been hidden for 3 centuries slid apart, revealing darkness below. And from that darkness, shapes began to rise. Ships, but calling them ships felt wrong. They were too large, too strange. Their hulls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when looked at directly. They rose from the planet in silence, dozens of them, and each one was larger than anything the Velthri had ever built. What are those? Someone on the bridge asked in a small voice. The human woman's face was still on the view screen. Tears were running down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. 300 years ago, she said, humanity fought a war that nearly broke the galaxy. We won, but the cost was too high. We looked at what we had become, and we were afraid. So we made a choice. We put away our weapons. We sealed our warships in the earth. We swore oaths of peace and hoped we would never have to break them. The great ships from below had reached orbit now. They surrounded the Velthri fleet like wolves circling sheep. Kira could feel the power radiating from them even through the hull of her ship. It pressed against her mind like a physical weight. We call them temple ships, the woman continued, because war, to us, is a kind of worship, a dark worship of death and destruction that we turned away from long ago. We became farmers, traders, keepers of peace. We chose to sleep rather than continue being what we were. One of the temple ships drifted closer to the dominant will. It was so large that it filled the entire view screen. Kira could see details on its hull now. The symbols were names, billions of names, carved into the metal in scripts from 100 different species. But we never forgot how to wake up, the woman said. And you just kicked the temple door, across human space. In every colony and outpost and hidden sanctuary, the same scene was playing out. Ancient systems came online. Sealed vaults opened. Weapons that the galaxy had believed were myths powered up for the first time in 3 centuries. And a single phrase propagated through quantum channels, reaching every human ear in the same instant. Temple protocols engaged. On the bridge of the dominant will, Kira Salveth finally understood. The stories about humanity were not myths. They were warnings. Warnings that her people had been too arrogant to hear. All ships, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, retreat. Full speed. Get us out of here. But even as her fleet turned to run, she knew it was too late. The temple ships were already moving to surround them. And the humans, those peaceful farmers who had slept for 300 years, were finally awake. In the galactic core, far from the border skirmish that had just changed everything, an ancient being stirred. The Moravik were creatures of living crystal, nearly immortal, blessed and cursed with perfect memory. The eldest of them had witnessed the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. Now, in its palace of singing stone, the Moravik ambassador felt the vibrations that signaled humanity's awakening. It had hoped this day would never come. It had prayed, in whatever way a crystal being could pray, that the younger races would be wise enough to let sleeping gods lie. They had not been wise. The Moravik began composing a message to the Galactic Council. It would need to warn them. It would need to explain what was coming. Not a war, necessarily. Humans did not wake to conquer. They woke to teach lessons, and their lessons were always written in fire and sorrow. The message was simple. The temples are open. The gods are awake. May the galaxy forgive us all for what comes next, far away. On a damaged station orbiting a beautiful blue-green world, the human woman closed the communications channel and bowed her head. Her tears continued to fall, but her hands were steady as she coordinated the awakening of forces that had not moved in 300 years. We tried, she whispered to no one. We tried so hard to stay asleep, but someone had kicked the temple door, and now the galaxy would remember why humanity had chosen to dream in the first place. The sleeping battle gods were awake, and they were not happy about it. And somewhere in the depths of human space, the temple ship's Conti. And somewhere in the depths of human space, the temple ship's Contithe Velthri High Command had made their decision. They would not surrender. They would not negotiate. They would fight. Admiral Thiessen Krov stood on the bridge of the Grand Dominion, the largest warship the Velthri had ever built. Around him, 500 vessels of the combined fleet waited for his orders. Reinforcements had poured in from every corner of the Dominion's territory. This was the full military might of a species that had conquered a dozen worlds. The humans are approaching, his sensor officer reported. 12 temple ships, perhaps 40 support vessels. Krov allowed himself a grim smile. 40 ships against 500. The humans might have advanced technology, but numbers had to count for something. His people had not built an empire by backing down from challenges. All ships, prepare for combat, he ordered. Today we show the galaxy that humanity's time as gods has passed, the fleet acknowledged. Weapons powered up across 500 hulls. Shields activated. Fighter craft launched from carrier bays. The Velthri Dominion had never assembled such force in one place before. On the other side of the engagement zone, Captain Maya Chen watched the enemy fleet through the view screen of her temple ship, the Remembrance. She was young for a temple ship commander, only 35. But she had been trained for this her entire life. The Chen family had carried the burden of humanity's military legacy for generations. They are not retreating, her tactical officer said quietly. No, Maya agreed. They still do not understand. She opened a channel to the other temple ships. 11 other captains appeared on her screen. Their faces showed the same expression she felt in her own heart, sadness mixed with resolve. Temple protocols are clear, she said. We disable, not destroy. We teach, not punish. Every life we take today is a failure, not a victory. Remember what we are fighting for. We remember, the other captains answered in unison. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her grandmother, who had commanded a temple ship during the Extinction Wars. She thought of the stories she had grown up hearing, the horror of those years, the joy of finally being able to put down their weapons, the sacred duty of keeping them ready in case they were ever needed again. She had hoped they would never be needed. She had prayed for a life of peace, but someone had kicked the temple door, and now she had to answer. All ships, she said, begin the lesson. The temple ships moved forward. Admiral Krov watched them come with growing confidence. They were so few, so slow. They did not even seem to be powering weapons. Perhaps the stories were exaggerated after all. Perhaps humanity had grown truly soft in their 3 centuries of sleep. Open fire, he commanded. All ships, full barrage. 500 warships unleashed everything they had. The space between the 2 fleets filled with plasma bolts, missiles, kinetic rounds, and energy beams. It was the most concentrated firepower the Dominion had ever produced. It should have vaporized anything in its path. The temple ships did not even try to avoid it. The barrage struck their shields and stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, simply stopped, as if the weapon's fire had hit an invisible wall and decided to give up. Increase power, Krov shouted. Concentrate fire on the lead ship. 300 vessels focused their attacks on the Remembrance. The shields flickered once, twice, and then stabilized. Inside the ship, Maya barely noticed the assault. She was focused on her targeting displays, carefully selecting which enemy vessels to disable first. Begin, she whispered. The Remembrance fired. A single beam of light, so white it hurt to look at, lanced out and struck a Velthri cruiser. The beam did not destroy the ship. It was far more precise than that. It burned through the hull at exactly the right points to disable the main reactor, the weapon systems, and the engines. Into seconds, a fully armed warship became a drifting hulk. Around her, the other temple ships opened fire. More beams, more surgical strikes. Velthri vessels went dark one by one, their crews alive but helpless. What is happening? Krov demanded. Return fire. All ships, return fire. They were returning fire. Every functioning weapon in the fleet was firing at maximum power. It made no difference. The temple ships moved through the Velthri formation like ghosts, untouchable and unstoppable. Their weapons reached out with impossible precision, killing ships without killing crews. Commander Kira Salvith watched from the observation deck of the human vessel, where she was held prisoner. A guard stood nearby, but he was not watching her. He was watching the battle with tears running down his face. "Why are you crying?" she asked. "You are winning." The guard turned to look at her. He was young, barely more than a boy, and his eyes held pain that seemed far too old for his face. "Every ship we disable is a failure," he said. "Every system we destroy is proof that we could not find another way. We trained our whole lives hoping we would never have to do this. And now," he gestured at the view screen, where another Velthri cruiser went dark. "Now we are remembering what we are, what we hoped we would never have to be again." Kira did not understand. How could victory be a source of grief? How could power be a burden? Her people had always celebrated strength. The strong took what they wanted. The weak served or died. That was the natural order. But watching the temple ships move through her people's fleet, she began to wonder if the Velthri understanding of strength was missing something important. On the Grand Dominion, Admiral Krov watched his fleet die around him. Not die in fire and glory, the way warriors should. His ships were being put to sleep like children who had stayed up too late. It was humiliating. It was impossible. It was terrifying. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we are being hailed. Put it through." Maya Chen's face appeared on his screen. She looked tired. She looked sad. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "Admiral, 300 of your ships are now disabled. 200 remain functional. You have shown bravery. But this battle is over. You cannot hurt us, and we do not want to hurt you. Please order your remaining ships to stand down." "Never," Krov snarled. "The Dominion does not surrender." "I know," Maya said. "I know your people's pride. I know your culture values strength above all else. But I need you to understand something." She leaned closer to the screen. "We are not asking you to be weak. We are asking you to be wise. There is a difference." "Pretty words," Krov spat. "But you are still the ones with the guns." "Yes," Maya agreed. "We are. And every moment that passes, every ship we disable, is a weight on our souls that we will carry forever. You think we enjoy this? You think we wanted to wake up and destroy your fleet? We spent 300 years trying to forget how to do this. We raised our children on stories of peace. We taught them that violence was a last resort, not a first option." Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. "Your people killed civilians on our colony world. Children died in that attack. And still, we are not killing you. We are disabling your ships, preserving your crews, giving you every chance to survive this day. Because we remember what happens when we stop showing mercy. We remember what we become when we let ourselves enjoy the killing." Krov stared at her. He had never seen an enemy commander talk like this. In his experience, those with power used it without apology. The strong did not explain themselves to the weak. "You are strange creatures," he said finally. "We know," Maya replied. "We are the species that became the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and then chose to become farmers. We are the species that buried our weapons in hope and dug them up in sorrow. We are the nightmare you were warned about, and we are also the ones who will help you rebuild when this is over. If you let us." She extended her hand toward the screen. A human gesture that Krov did not understand, but somehow found moving. "Please, Admiral, let this end. Let us find another way." For a long moment, Krov said nothing. Around him, his bridge crew watched in silence. The battle continued outside. More ships go in dark every minute. At this rate, his entire fleet would be disabled within the hour. He thought about his family back on the home world. His mate, his children, his parents, who had raised him to believe in Velthri supremacy. He thought about what they would say if he surrendered, the shame he would bring to his house. And then he thought about what they would say if he died here, uselessly, accomplishing nothing but the deaths of thousands of his own people. "All ships," he said slowly, as if the words cost him physical pain, "stand down. Weapons offline. Shields to minimum, Admiral." His first officer gasped. "We have lost," Krov said. "Only a fool continues to fight a battle that cannot be won. We will survive. We will learn. And perhaps, one day, we will understand these strange creatures who could destroy us and choose not to. On the Remembrance, Maya Chen watched the Velthary fleet go still. Her crew cheered, but she did not join them. She slumped back in her command chair and covered her face with her hands. "Captain," her first officer asked with concern. "We won," Maya whispered. "We won, and we did it without massacres, without atrocities, without becoming the monsters we were afraid of. But we still fired our weapons. We still disabled hundreds of ships. We still proved that the galaxy was right to fear us." She looked up at the view screen, where the defeated Velthary fleet drifted in darkness. "We woke up, SH. Before I was a soldier, I was a farmer. I grew things. I planted seeds and watched them become food that fed my family and my neighbors. That was my strength for 30 years. Growing things, building things, making life where there was. Before I was a soldier, I was a farmer. I grew things. I planted seeds and watched them become food that fed my family and my neighbors. That was my strength for 30 years. Growing things, building things, making life where their waste vote was held 3 weeks after the summit began. The Velthary High Council gathered in their ancient chamber on the homeworld, surrounded by statues of conquering heroes and walls carved with tales of victory. For 1,000 years, this room had been a temple to strength. Today, it would decide whether strength meant something different than they had always believed. Kareth Ven stood before his people and delivered the speech of his lifetime. "For generations," he said, "we have defined power by what we could take. We built our empire on conquest. We measured our worth by the weakness of others. And when we encountered humanity, we saw farmers and traders where our ancestors saw warriors and kings. We thought they had forgotten how to fight." He paused, letting his words sink into the silence. "We were wrong. Humanity did not forget. They chose. They had the power to rule the galaxy, and they chose to grow crops instead. They had weapons that could end civilizations, and they chose to bury them. They looked at godhood and said, 'No, we would rather be gardeners.'" An elder counselor spoke up. "And yet, when we attacked them, they showed us those weapons quickly enough. Their mercy has limits." "Yes," Kareth agreed. "Their mercy has limits, but so does their violence. They could have destroyed us. Instead, they disabled our ships and invited us to dinner. They could have made us slaves. Instead, they offered to make us partners." He shook his head in wonder. "I have met Admiral Chenwei. He is not a man who enjoys power. He farms, he plants seeds. He told me that killing even one enemy soldier costs him sleep for weeks. Weakness." Another counselor muttered. "Is it?" Kareth asked. "We have always called mercy weakness. But when you have the strength to destroy anything and you choose to create instead, is that truly weak? Or is it a kind of strength we have never understood?" He walked to the center of the chamber and looked up at the statues of ancient warriors. "Our ancestors conquered because they had to. The universe was dangerous, and only the strong survived. But the universe is different now. The great threats are gone. The collective is dead. The elder species have retreated into silence. There is room in this galaxy for something other than endless war." He turned back to face the council. "Humanity is offering us that something. They are asking us to help them stay peaceful. They are begging us to be their conscience, their watchers, their friends. And if we refuse," the elder counselor asked, "then they will remain awake. Their temple ships will stay active. And eventually, they will become what they fear most, conquerors who rule through force because they have forgotten any other way. They will win because nothing can stand against them. But they will lose themselves. And so will we, and so will everyone else in the galaxy." The council was silent for a long moment. Then a young counselor stood. She was Kira Solvith's daughter, and she carried a small plant in a ceramic pot. "My mother gave me this," she said. "She told me it grew from a seed that the human admiral placed in her hand. She told me to bring it here, to show the council what humanity is offering us." She placed the plant on the speaking platform. It was small and green and completely unremarkable. But in that moment, in that chamber dedicated to conquest and war, it seemed like the most powerful thing in the room. "This plant does not conquer," the young counselor said. "It does not demand tribute or obedience. It simply grows. It turns sunlight and water into life. It builds instead of destroys. Humanity is asking us to learn how to be like this plant, to find our strength in growing instead of taking. She looked around the chamber at the carved warriors and the symbols of ancient battles. Our ancestors built this empire because they believed that was the only way to survive. Maybe they were right. Maybe conquest was necessary once. But it is not necessary anymore. We can choose something different. We can plant seeds instead of swords. The vote was held an hour later. It was closer than anyone had expected. But in the end, the Velthri Dominion chose to accept humanity's offer. They would become watchers. 5 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. The temple ships returned to their hidden places beneath the earth of human worlds. Their crews said goodbye to their vessels like soldiers saying goodbye to old friends. Some cried, some laughed. All of them felt the weight of duty lifting from their shoulders. As the temple doors closed once again, Admiral Chen Wei returned to his farm. He planted his fields and watched his grandchildren play in the sunshine. Sometimes, late at night, he would walk out to the field behind his house and look up at the stars. He knew that somewhere out there, the temple ships waited in darkness, ready to wake if they were needed again. He hoped they would sleep forever. Kira Salvith became the first Velthri ambassador to humanity. She spent her days learning about this strange species that had chosen peace over power. She studied their history, their culture, their philosophy. She could not say she fully understood them, even after all this time, but she had learned to respect them. Her daughter, the one who had brought the plant to the council chamber, became a historian. She traveled across the galaxy, collecting stories about the extinction wars and the great sleep that followed. She wanted future generations to remember why the temple doors had been sealed. She wanted them to understand that the greatest victory was not the battle you won, but the battle you found a way not to fight. The Moravic ambassador, ancient beyond measure, watched it all with crystalline satisfaction. For 300 years, it had worried that the younger races would force humanity to wake up. Now, finally, there was hope. The galaxy was learning, growing, becoming something better than the sum of its violent parts. On the neutral station where the Peace Summit had been held, a memorial was built. It was a simple thing, a garden planted with seeds from 100 different worlds. In the center stood a statue, not of a warrior or a king, but of a farmer. The inscription at its base was written in every known language. True strength is not measured by what you can destroy. It is measured by what you choose to protect. Delegations from across the galaxy came to visit the garden. They walked among the plants, breathed the sweet air, and thought about what it meant to be strong. Many of them left changed. And in the depths of human space, the temple ships dreamed. They dreamed of peace. They dreamed of gardens and children and stars that shone without the fire of war. They dreamed of a galaxy where no one needed to fight, where every species could grow and flourish and reach for the light. They dreamed of the day when they would never need to wake again. Years turned into decades. Decades turned into centuries. The Velthri Watchers kept their vigil, passing the duty from generation to generation. They monitored the galaxy for threats. They mediated disputes before they became wars. They remembered why humanity had chosen to sleep, and they made sure everyone else remembered too. Kira Salvith died at the age of 147, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her last words were about a seed and a strange species that had shown her mercy when they had no reason to. She was buried in a garden, just like the human she had learned to love. Admiral Chen Wei died at 93, in his bed, holding his wife's hand. His last words were a request that they plant an apple tree over his grave. His family honored his wish. The tree grew tall and strong and bore fruit for generations. And on a quiet day in a quiet year, a Velthri historian named Selif Kira brought her young daughter to the memorial garden on the neutral station. The child was 7 years old, with curious eyes and an endless supply of questions. "Mother," she asked, "why did the humans go to sleep?" Selith knelt beside her daughter and smiled. Because they dreamed of a galaxy where no one needed to fight, and they were patient enough to wait for it. Did they find it? Selith looked around the garden, at the plants from 100 worlds growing together in harmony. She thought about the temple ships sleeping beneath human soil, the watchers keeping their vigil. The galaxy slowly learning to grow instead of conquer. Not yet, she said, but they are still dreaming. And as long as they dream, there is hope. The child nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. Then she ran off to explore the garden, her laughter echoing through the flowers. Selith watched her go with love in her heart. She thought about her grandmother, who had once commanded a fleet against humanity and had ended her life as their ambassador. She thought about the seed that had changed everything, and the words that Admiral Chenwei had spoken so many years ago. The measure of strength is not what you can destroy, it is what you choose to protect. Humanity had chosen to protect the galaxy from themselves. They had buried their power and planted gardens in its place. They had shown the universe that the strongest thing anyone could do was choose not to fight. And somewhere, in the quiet darkness beneath the earth, the temple ships continued to dream. They dreamed of their crews, who had returned to peaceful lives. They dreamed of the Watchers, who kept faith with their ancient promise. They dreamed of gardens and children and a galaxy learning to grow. They were sleeping battle gods, and as